Hello and welcome. We have finally reached this point in time. I am Raven. This is Blood Honey. And if you've happened to have seen any of our other videos, I've been the horror fan for a few years now, probably about 10 or so years for, being more in tune with a lot of the more classic horror and stuff. I've gradually become more of a fan over time. I've been taking her through the journey, the plethora of most of the major franchises like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and of course now Halloween. We saw Halloween Kills together. That was the first one we saw together in theaters like that. You pretty much enjoyed that.
Oh, it was the best.
Yeah, for many people, of course, that was very much like 50-50, if you will. But hey, we have arrived now with Halloween Ends. Now, I'm going to just try to jump into this as best we can. I guess we'll pretty much go into spoilers for the most part. I mean, we know we're not the first one anyone's going to go to for a review of this, but we'll just start off maybe with some general thoughts and then maybe just kind of move into some spoiler territory. But also, I do have some things to say as far as the outlook of this trilogy and what I feel like could have been done differently to have changed things up a bit. Because I do have some very particular thoughts on that. Because I know this one is very much like it's very much a Halloween 3 new beginning type of deal with a lot of people. It's just very different. And we knew that going into it. We absolutely knew that. We did a little bit of a discussion before, and I pretty much called it pretty much exactly how I felt like it was going to be. Maybe you have most of the movie with this person, and then maybe towards the end, you might have him come in and do this and that stuff. So I pretty much had the general scope of how this was going to look. So I'm not completely shocked going into this. It's just a matter of execution, and they took some risks. Did they work out? I guess we'll see. So just right off the bat, you can go in and do your thing. What did you think walking away from it?
It was, how I explained it to my coworkers yesterday. It was weird. It was
Certainly that, yeah.
different. And you'd have to go see it for yourself and make your own judgments.
Absolutely.
I liked it. It's not my favorite. Because the original will always be my favorite. But Halloween Kills was better. um I don't know specific details like writing, directing. I could go along. You can lead me through that, and I'd be like, oh yeah. But yeah, definitely. How I felt Halloween Kills was better. I guess there was just more going on. I know the whole mob thing at the hospital, blah blah blah, whatever. I kind of looked past that because him killing. I mean, dude, the fireman sequence was the coolest thing ever. But anyway,
Yeah.
I like that.
As an isolated moment, of course, cinematography wise, it was on point, absolutely. So again, yeah, I understand the last one was divisive with fans, it's very much 50-50. This one, I would say, is definitely another animal in and of itself as far as, yeah, most people, it seems like the general consensus now, either people hate the shit out of this, or some people see it for what it is. And I'm very much, okay, so
feels like 70-30.
yeah, that's fairly accurate, I would say. Okay, so going into this one again, I knew what the deal was. I knew the Corey Cunningham character. I heard about that. I heard there was going to be Christine vibes. I heard they were definitely going to take some chances. It was not going to be, what we've seen thus far. And obviously they had a bit of a break, with the pandemic stuff. So they actually went back and did some rewriting and actually decided to go ahead and jump it ahead 4 years. Now, was that the best decision? Honestly, when you watch the film and as you start to see things play out, as far as the Michael element, I'm not 100% sure that it was the best way to go about it. Maybe you should have stuck to your guns initially. Like, I don't know 100% what they were going to go with initially as far as taking place on the same night and all that shit. But yeah, doing that and knowing what they did with Michael in isolation, I see exactly what they were going for as far as, and this, yeah, we're just going to kind of just slowly roll into the spoiler stuff. is as far as that element, as far as basically portraying Michael and him just just living away in this like little sewer area, this little tunnel, and where you see that he's kind of become weaker, assumingly so because I guess he hasn't really been doing a lot of killing, and maybe like I said, his evil is just starting to wear down, something like that. It's not 100%. Again, I see what they were going for, but when you do it in this movie the way that you did, knowing that 2018 started 40 years after the fact, he hadn't been doing shit since then. He'd been locked away. He escapes. He goes out, starts doing this thing, and then once you get in the kills, of course, he just goes on a complete friggin' rampage, and by the end of that movie, just slaughters a
Everybody.
dozen people at once.
Everybody.
Absolutely so. And then you get to this point where it's just been about a 4 year break, and then all of a sudden he's just kind of withering away, and you question that. You're just like, again, the direction I see in isolation, but with what you set up already, I'm not so sure that makes the most amount of sense. And as we know, of course, in this film, he's not in it that much. He comes into it
No.
about, I don't know, about the midway point, sort of, and even then, his screen time is very minimal. Now, how did you think about that part as far as what they were
Like
doing with him?
when Corey discovered him.
Yeah, when Corey discovers him and what they were doing with Michael, what were you thinking exactly, and did it work for you?
Well, I want to roll back a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because I noticed this right away. Normally, I don't like pick up on a whole bunch of like foreshadowing, but them constantly like having shots of that
That
auger
grinder,
thing.
yeah.
I'm like, they're gonna do something with that later. I did they whenever they had like the shot of him going in, to
Mm-hmm.
the junkyard and working and whatever, there was always that thing there. I'm like, oh yeah, something's gonna happen with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't really want to get too far ahead of myself. I'm like, well, yeah, but anyway, that part. I mean, with the people that we've been following, and they've discussed this, that, and the other. I kind of figured that was going to happen. I mean, the previews showed this. It's like, yeah, okay. So I guess that's what he's been up to, which was kind of creepy, I guess, and weird that
Mm-hmm.
he was just kind of holed up in this little sewer thing and the whole dragging bodies in there. I'm not quite sure what's up with that. I mean, maybe I don't want to know because it's kind of the mystique of how he was the way he was,
Yeah.
supernatural and all that stuff. But I totally get
Yeah.
it with the whole being like weaker thing.
Yeah.
It's like a vampire. If they sit for too long, or they don't eat, well, they're obviously gonna die. But
Yeah.
they
But
desiccate.
yeah.
So that's
But
what it made
again,
me
what
think
makes
of.
it the most confusing though is that knowing how Kills ended, he saw
Mm-hmm.
the whole town. He basically went Super Saiyan, and then so after that,
Yeah, he
then
kills
what? Like
Karen,
what?
and then it's just
Then why
like
be so dormant for all that time? And then again, why if he was rotting away in that place for 40 years, like why didn't he become as weak as he was then? I don't know if it's supposed to be a combination of old age or some shit. I mean, at first I thought when we first saw him and when he first started, when you saw him, kind of, be a little off, as far as his body movements and shit. I was like,
limp.
I don't
Well,
know,
he had it. Well, I mean, he had I guess,
especially since
years
they
from
said,
that fight at the end of the movie.
yeah, and
But
especially since they mentioned which wasn't really much of an element as much as I probably thought. Them probably putting in some pandemic stuff, maybe people locked away in their houses and stuff. Maybe just add the extra layer of stuff the town's been through or whatever. They didn't really have that in there, but even when I first saw that, I was just like, "Oh, please don't tell me he got he got the virus and he's just dying." Like, is that what's doing him in? I don't know. That would have been horrible. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I don't know because I know so many people have lost their minds saying how bad this is, and I absolutely understand. And I can understand people who at least applaud the risks. And for me, for like the first half, absolutely so. For like the first like 30 minutes at the very least, I was down with what they were doing because
Dude, my jaw was like,
the way this film starts off, it really is a holy shit moment. I, it's very rarely that I would like watch a scene happen and then me just go like shit, and I literally did that. I was just like, holy. So it starts off with Corey babysitting this kid. You know, he goes to the house, he meets the family. You know, big nice house and all this shit. He's babysitting this kid. Blah blah blah. They're hanging out. They're watching the thing on television. This and that. And the kid's being a little bit of an asshole. And so so you have this whole moment play out. You have him to where the kid seems like he's gone missing. Corey, happens to wander up to the stairs at one point to like the attic area. He gets locked in there, and the boy, happened to be the one that locked him in there. He's just like, dude, let me out of here. Like, what the hell is
he
all this
was
about? He was
having a
being,
panic attack.
yeah, he was being a little punk sitting there locking him in there. It's like, he's your babysitter and shit. And so he's desperately just trying to get out. And so, lo and behold, holy fuck, he sits there and manages to kicks the fucking door open. Kid goes flying down the fucking flight of stairs, and
Yeah,
you see that one
like
awkward ass shot.
2-3 story.
It's very low, and it's like out of focus, and you see like the body land and like the head pop up, and you're just like, fuck. And as
The whole
far as
theater was like,
as far as an opening, as far as like hit you with that punch, that's probably the biggest like gut punch of an opening since the original, when audiences are experiencing that for the first time. You have the stalker going in, he stabs the girl, and then you see the reveal. It's like this kid doing it. It's like, what the hell? It was very reminiscent of that, and I can applaud them for that. As far as like hitting you that hard, especially in this fashion, it was like
yeah,
way worse.
The lead up to
Way
it,
worse.
because you see him struggling, little kid on the other side of the door being a jerk, and the parents are coming home
right as
so
that
like,
shit,
what
like
the
right
hell's
as
gonna
it
happen?
happens,
And he falls down right in front of their faces.
and you feel so fucking bad for Corey. You really do, because again, you can imagine, because he was not his fault, obviously, whatsoever.
Well, yeah,
it's like he had to get out of there,
shit.
that little kid, and he just fucked himself over way worse. And then so that was like what, Halloween 2019, I think it said at the beginning, and so yeah, with an opening like that, absolutely 100% I was for. And then you get to the title sequence.
That was pretty cool.
And you had like the blue lettering, which is actually the same font. It came to the realization after the fact that that was reminiscent of Season of the Witch, that opening, which I was like, okay, that makes sense with, I guess, what you're going for here. So
I didn't even think about it till you said it just now.
yeah, because I was like, oh,
I was just
lettering.
Focused on watching the
and
pumpkins.
No one gets supposed to be different. I'm like,
parts.
okay, well, yeah, that is different. So yeah, and so you're going along. You're basically following Corey with this, and you just see like a year after the fact how the town people perceive him and whatnot, and how of course all these stories be like, oh yeah, did you do that, this and that, which we see in reality, of course, all the time. When something may happen, accident or not, how people view someone else, and you really start to see like just how that has affected them ever since. And then again, I was going along with this quite a bit. I was actually really into it because for what it was on its own, I was enjoying watching that play out. And the actor who was playing the Corey character, I felt like he was actually rather engaging and fascinating, because I felt like with the opening, it's very much in knowing where they go with him. It was very much a nice, like, kind of, a way to flip around what we've seen with the original Halloween, knowing that Michael was the one who killed his own sister, the babysitter. But in this instance, where the babysitter is like the innocent one who happens to incidentally kill this kid. And I felt like that was an interesting kind of dynamic with what the original was, especially knowing how the opening itself was executed. I felt like that really packed a really nice punch, where I applauded it for that. I was just like, yeah, that was something else. And so going along, and we start to see Lori, and then she happens to run into him. And what did you think about Lori in this one? Because she is definitely harkening back to the Lori of old that we used to know. She's not as like Sarah Connor-esque as some would probably say. She's definitely toned down quite a bit, and she goes back a little bit more of that playful nature than what we had originally. How did you feel about her in this movie? Because honestly, I think I liked the way they played her in this one a little bit more. That I felt like it feels, again, yeah, somewhat inconsistent, knowing especially where Kills left off, because we've had the 40-year gap. It's been her life's obsession with Michael Myers. And then 40 years later, once the night ends with her daughter getting killed, and then you have just this 4 year gap, and then now she's kind of back to being more of like a, oh yeah, just trying to live my life type of situation. As far as that being consistent, it does seem rather odd to have done it that way when you should have either stuck to one or the other as far as her portrayal. How did you feel about it? Because that was a little, even though I like this version probably in a way a little bit more, I find it kind of odd as far as transitioning from Kills to this one, as far as where we find her character.
Um, well, the badass one from Kills was, well, the first one, I should say. Well, maybe a little bit of Kills, but that was pretty cool. I mean, after all that time, you just, well, obviously you would want to be prepared if it would ever happen again. Um, and in ends, it was nice to not see her in the hospital for one, um, and having her fun and flirt with the Hawkins.
I do like
That
their
was
scenes
super cute.
together, as far as like just being that real down to earth, just watching them, because especially the Hawkins character, he's just, especially Will Patton in general, he's just he plays very well that down to earth, just like everyday type of guy. He's very likable and just really like just a nice guy, and you really did enjoy those little moments between the two of
Mm,
them. Although knowing what the little bit of connection that they had in the last one, knowing it's been 4 years, I'm like, why haven't they been together this whole time? They should have at least
right?
been a
I kind
couple.
of
And like
thought
they're
about
just kind of
that.
running into the grocery store with one another. I'm just like, really, you two are not, hitting it off a little bit more than that? I'm like, come on, man, damn.
Yeah, with the conversation she had with Allison and just you gotta find someone where you just want to whip your tits out and be like, ha.
That was a funny little moment.
That
She does
was
like the little like.
that was
Even
hilarious.
that was like caught off guard. But that was just like, okay, that was pretty funny. I'll give you that.
Yeah, and I feel bad that she wrecked her pie.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, like that poor
Hmm.
thing was just decimated. Um,
And again, I'm gonna go into this more as to like how to have changed some things in this trilogy to make it more cohesive. Like I said, we'll get there because I do have some
yeah,
things to say that I do feel
yeah.
like honestly would have played a hell of a lot better for like pretty much everyone. And I'm telling you right now, because you could tell that this shit probably was not planned out at all. But as far as like this Corey character in this shit, I have some ideas of be like, why in the hell didn't you think of this sooner? Because you really could have set yourself up a lot better than this. But go ahead.
Oh no, it's basically she was a little mix of she's just trying to be normal after all this time. I mean, sure, I guess he could always show up again and home. Um, but having that preparedness, and I knew she was struggling, but she would never want to kill herself. That was definitely a nice little trick up her sleeve to draw out,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the
Yeah, that
people.
moment, like I said,
So,
again, like Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in this one, I do think it's the best of the three films. And again, I like this version of Lori that they went with because it harkens back to what she was in the first one. And it's just a matter of, I mean, I know this film in and of itself is very different as far as the
mhm.
direction they take things, but as far as character consistency with what we've gotten thus far, it just probably doesn't quite line up as much. Like it should have been, again, either like the lore that we saw in the previous two throughout into this one, or this version from 18 onward. It would have made more sense. Again, because knowing that her daughter, knowing the trauma she's been dealing with, and then finally her daughter is killed, and it seems like by the end of Kills, especially with the more like extended deleted scene where you see her kind of walking out of the hospital, it seems like she's ready to go get after Michael and all this and that shit. And then now she finally just decides to kind of take things slow. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know what stopped you there after all that time, but I don't know.
I don't
I don't
know.
really know what they were
Maybe
going
they
for with
had
that.
her and Allison had some kind of
I mean, it's
conversation, you know.
possible, I suppose, but still, like character wise and
Hmm.
storyline wise, for a trilogy, it's very odd.
Yeah,
Now, again, this one is very much in isolation. This is a fascinating idea, but it really does beg the question as a third act in a trilogy, is this really the smartest way to have gone about this movie? Because, of course, as we know now at this point, that Corey basically becomes his own Michael, where he does run into Michael into the tunnel. They kind of have these moments, and it seems like something about either something about Michael's evil transfers into him, or something about that just pushes Corey into his own sense of madness and becoming a killer, because he does start to kill some people, because there was this one group of bullies that he runs into that kind of first initiates a lot more of like pushing him into this. And that's when he first meets Lori at the gas station. He cuts his hand on the glass and stuff. He's getting pissed off and this and that. And so they run into each other, and then Lori kind of sets him up to start dating Allison. And again, as far as their dynamic, I actually was enjoying that. I was enjoying watching them go through all of this, and I wasn't, yeah, like we were just listening to a little bit ago, someone else saying like how I was kind of just enjoying watching this play out up until we got to Michael, because once you get to Michael, it's like as much as you think that you're there to see him, with this film in particular, um you felt like you weren't really missing Michael, to be perfectly honest. I was enjoying this little story that they were telling there. But yeah, once Michael comes into the picture, it does kind of raise a little bit more questions and it does give you answers. And this being the third film in this, it does make you wonder, like, what exactly were they truly going for here? And does this really make sense as a third film, considering what we've seen so far? I don't think it really makes that much sense by the grand scheme of things. And once you start getting, because they basically start tag teaming him and Michael,
that was pretty
which
cool.
is interesting. Like you'll
Yeah,
either probably like that or not. I mean, I was fine with it, but
it
I'm
was
still
an
like
interesting
asking
idea.
questions as to like, what is Michael's motivation in this? And again,
What is
what
this
is making
dynamic?
what's making him like this? Because he should have been as powerful as he's ever been, knowing where we left kills. But again, knowing this little gap, it's just not as consistent with what we've seen in the previous two. Now I know they wanted to take some risks, but
It
again,
does seem
trilogy. But again,
uncharacteristic.
trilogy wise, this is really not lining up, because as I've said before, with like a lot of previous films, knowing I've been far enough removed from like the new beginnings, like the Jason Takes Manhattan, and knowing he doesn't really go to Manhattan, all this other stuff, and the Season of the Witches, looking at them in isolation, it's like for the most part, some of them can have their things and be fine for what they are. But with this, it's the same thing, but knowing how tightly connected this is supposed to be with the previous two, and this is supposed to be the conclusion of the Michael Laurie saga, direction wise, it begs too many questions. It really does. And then by the time you get to the end, yeah, their fight is only maybe 5 minutes long, and then and then Michael winds up killing Corey, because Corey winds up taking Michael's mask. He winds up going to confront Lori, and that's when you see the moment where it looks like she's about to kill herself, which is honestly a badass moment. Like the setup of that, and then you see her, you hear the gunfire, and then you see something splat on the wall. You realize
Hear the
you
splat
realize this is a
sound,
pumpkin,
yeah.
though, pretty much immediately. And she's like, "You really think I killed myself, motherfucker?" And she shoots him, which is badass. It's like that moment
Yeah.
I liked. And then again, once that happens, Michael comes in. He stabs Corey like pretty much like right through the throat and shit. They have their throwdown. Basically,
No, he does it to himself, remember? Because he's
yeah,
like, if
yeah,
I
that's right.
can't have Allison, no one can. And
Yeah,
he does it.
and he does that.
And
But
then
then
that
Michael
like
comes in.
triggers the whole Allison thing, and then she goes to leave, and then
Yeah,
Michael shows up
and
and
then
does
she
all that
comes in,
shit.
and then
So
he comes in and finishes him off, like snaps his neck.
yeah,
And yeah, you had the whole fight in the kitchen. How did you feel about like the conclusion with Corey? And did you feel like they should have done more with that?
I think so. I mean, it was an interesting concept. If they were gonna um pass the torch, as they say, that probably would have been the way to go. I mean, even if they still ended up killing Michael, they would have had this other dude they could have like locked up for attempting to do whatever to Lori, and then he would have, I guess, turned into that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Like
don't
I felt
know.
like they really just didn't follow through with what they were setting up the whole time as much. Like it's like the whole like first 2/3 of the film we're wanting to be different and kind of do our own like little story here, but then by like the third act, it's like, well, shit, now we gotta go, old school Halloween, and it's like, fuck it, Michael's gotta come in and just gotta finish Corey, and then just fight Lori and all that stuff, and because Corey does get some decent kills, he gets the best kills really in this series, or at least in this film. Like all those guys at the junkyard, like with the blowtorch in the mouth and shit, that was actually pretty
That was
cool.
hardcore.
And as far as like the DJ, that was pretty badass. That's
Well,
probably the
that
best
was
one.
reminiscent of 18 though, with
Yeah,
the
as far
guy
as
at the
like kind of
gas
like the
station.
jaw, like just kind of like is similar to that and stuff, but
Yeah.
he like bashes his head onto the player and stuff like that. He just takes scissors and he cuts his tongue off and shit, and it was just like damn. So that was pretty gnarly. But once you get to the end though, and then so Lori winds up pinning Michael to the table with some knives and stuff like that, and she kind of throws down the refrigerator on his leg and stuff, and then pulls off his mask and is like it suddenly starts to like slice his neck and stuff, and then Allison comes in, she breaks his arm like with fucking knees, like she literally almost just like
Well,
walks
that's
in.
after he frees his hand and goes to choke her.
Yeah, he goes to choke her, and
That,
she's like,
well,
yeah,
I
go
mean,
ahead
not
and
the
kill me.
choking
And
part, but because it was stabbed through with that damn knife, and he just yanked it and went, you know,
yeah, and she's like,
choke on her.
do it, and
Like, damn,
whatever, and
that
then
was.
yeah, but then I just find it funny because Allison, like, she just kind of casually almost walks in and then just suddenly just snaps his arm like a motherfucker, like with like no problem whatsoever. Just and it's like, damn, I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, and so yeah, they slowly like they slide. All right, uh, continuing on. So he's like bleeding out and all this stuff, and then it just makes you realize that, well, I enjoyed moments in that, but it makes me wonder: is like, did that happen a little too quickly? And is that really the conclusion I wanted to see as
Felt
far
a
as their
little
fight goes?
rushed.
It
I
does. That's the
figured the fight would have been more. Well, I mean, funny as it sounds, more like a wrestling match. 20-minute time limit.
at the
A,
least,
a
yeah.
a cat and mouse like knockdown drag out. I mean, it kind of was all compacted into this 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So
And then
I
yeah,
don't
so
know.
after that's done, they strap Michael to the top of, I think it was Allison's car and
Yeah.
stuff like that, because they had some moments with Corey and stuff and her muffler and him blah blah blah. And then so yeah, so they transport Michael over to that junkyard area, and yeah, the whole town is basically following along with this, and so like I like the one moment where the sheriff shows up, where he's just like,
Not tonight, it ain't.
it's like, yeah, not.
That was pretty good. I'm like,
I
hell
mean, this
yeah.
guy. I mean, he really is like just so underutilized in these films. But I love that character. Like, I like the little bit of potential I see in that guy. But damn it, they really should have done more with him because he was fun.
Yeah,
I,
he. I mean, it's weird to say, but I don't know.
ah, okay. Bloopers, you gotta love them. Anyway, yeah, continue what you're saying.
Um, so the sheriff guy, I mean, yeah, out of the three films and stuff, he probably could have been used better, but I just felt like in this one, he was just kind of like a token character.
Kind of is in a way,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Yeah.
but that was a good line.
Yeah,
I
I mean
gotta give him
he
that.
has some fun, like in
This isn't
Kills.
how we do things.
Yeah,
Well,
and
tonight
even
it isn't.
Kills, just that like that one moment once he saw the wreckage of like once Michael came out of the fire and stuff, he's like
Fucker.
motherfucker. I
That
mean,
was
he's amusing as
great.
shit, but damn it, he's useless. I'm sorry, but and even in this one, like Lindsay is also underutilized because you
Mm.
saw just what little spark of like cool stuff you could get from her, like with her little confrontation with Michael. They should have done a little bit more with her. Same thing with Hawkins. Even as much as I enjoyed their little moments together, I feel like he definitely should, and especially knowing the flashback scenes from the previous one and knowing history with Michael. He should have played more into the finale of this and confronting Michael with Laurie or something. I think they should have done more there. Absolutely so.
I don't know if you were gonna touch on this, but I was shocked to see the light bulb lady.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah. The,
I thought for sure there was no way you could survive that, and because she
you'd think
just
she
sat
her
there
ass
and
would have
like,
bled out because
yeah,
she
was bleeding out watching her like
yeah Michael just
boyfriend or
like
whatever
take this.
and stab the shit out of him, and she was just like,
I mean, as far as like that scene goes with that
God,
woman,
yeah,
and
that
like
was
kind
kind of
of playing off of Laurie's guilt
mean, I
of that,
guess.
like that alone is fine. But yeah, it's just like a nice little cameo from that woman because again, knowing she was actually had that little bit part in 18, so it was a nice like little through character that we kind of got that it played out. But anyway, yeah, going into the finale, everyone's showing up together. They go to the junkyard area, and Laurie essentially pushes Michael into the fucking grinder. And then this is the first time
She
where we
pushes the button. I think I don't know if she
well, no,
actually
someone
helps.
pulled the switch, and she's like kind of pushing Michael
Hmm.
into it. And then this is the first time where we definitively see Michael in such a position where he can't come back from. Like, yeah, in H2O we see his head get knocked up, but knowing how they followed that up, technically it's like, well, definitely not as dead as he's been. This is
Yeah,
Mike.
that's another one of the lines that I wanted to mention because she's like not dead enough, and
Yeah,
then
and it's
that,
like,
yeah,
and then seeing that image, honestly, just that little bit because they cut to it, and as like they have the dummy in there, you see it fold in, and then knowing that that's Michael, honestly, like that image itself is a little surreal to have kind of seen for some like after all this time. It's just
yeah.
like, and knowing all the shit that's transpired in this film, it's
Knowing
like,
all that's
is
happened to
I
him,
don't even
he
know how what to
survived a
think
whole
about it. I
bunch.
mean, it's kind of badass, but at the same time, I'm
Yeah,
just like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's crazy to see. But yeah, and then you have the little final moments where it's daytime. Laurie's at home and stuff. You see that Allison is driving out of Haddonfield, and then you have the last moments with Laurie and Hawkins just kind of sitting out at the doorstep and stuff. And I liked here as far as the final shots that we got because it harkens back to the original film where you saw all those cutaway shots to spaces in the neighborhood, like inside the houses, outside the houses, and you had that last one with Michael's house, and you hear the breathing in the background. This one gives you those identical shots, but it's broad daylight, it's peaceful, it's quiet, and so you have all those shots, and it just cut. As far as like being poetic and ending like as far as like ending the trilogy, the saga, those shots in isolation, that was perfect. I would say I feel like you really couldn't have done that better as far as that goes. So that I could appreciate as far as that. But the movie as a whole it really is. I'm not gonna be hyperbolic and say this is a big giant piece of shit because in isolation as its own thing, I appreciate a lot of it because again I was with it for like the first like 2/3 because I felt like once you were getting into like the between the second and third act, I felt like okay, I feel like you're probably losing me a little bit as far as the dynamic with Michael and all this stuff. I feel like, okay, I feel like you need to shift gears here a bit because as much as I was enjoying the Allison, the Corey dynamic and what they were building there, I felt like still something was missing heavily by that point. I'm like, you really have to do something crazy here in order to really make me feel like, okay, is this really the right path to take? And I appreciate certain things about that ending, but at the same time, I'm still kind of unsure. Is like, I don't know if that's what I would have done. But I mean, so what about you? As final thoughts, kind of to wrap that bit up.
I well, yeah, I'm definitely not a filmmaker. I'm not sure what
Again,
I would have done.
I'm about to get into this just to cap this off. Is what
So
made sense to me.
it, uh, I had more thoughts on how Scream 6 should go based on how Scream 5 was. But
Yeah, I had my
this,
ideas
I'm
for
like,
that.
I don't know. I don't know. So,
I mean, I
yeah.
feel like for even people who are who are a bit higher on this film than even most people, even they probably are seeming like I'm not 100% sure if that's what you should have done. And I can understand absolutely 100% pretty much any way or the other. And even for me, I knowing what they were doing, like I was fine with them going in and taking chances. Like, well, if you manage to do something wild as shit, but then somehow lands, and I'm like, okay, well, I didn't think about that. That somehow worked. Bravo. And for me, half of it did, and half of it, I'm not. I don't quite think it did. And so for that, it was. It really is going to be quite an interesting discussion for the next few years to see what happens here with this. But all in all, I really didn't hate it. A lot of it I did appreciate, but at the same time, as far as the actual Michael and Laurie element by the end, like as far as their ties together, it begs a lot of questions,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely so, and it does make you wonder. It's like you really probably should have left this as its own separate thing, and it really probably just, in a sense, played it safer. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much all I can say about it. Honestly, it's just I can't trash it, but I can't necessarily say I love
No.
it either. It's just fascinating. It truly is. It's something else. Yeah. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and give you as best as I can my general consensus is what should have happened here. All right, what they should have done is that they should have had this Corey character in mind from the jump. Halloween 2018 should have started with basically like the first like 30 minutes of this film. You should have had Halloween 2018 start with this opening scene from this film, as far as, like I said, that punch that you kind of felt with the original. You can go along with the whole, setting up the Corey character and that whole instance and how that's been playing out for him. But this entire time, basically, Michael hadn't been around. He probably hadn't even been captured. He probably had been missing for 40 years. Like, what the fuck has happened here? And then, so you can go through all of that. You can have him meet Laurie, set him up with Allison, blah, blah, blah. And then killings start to occur again. A lot of people are going to be looking at Corey as the guy that potentially did it, since that instance is more fresh in the town's mind as far as what's happening. And maybe they feel like, and knowing that maybe it had been a year since that had happened, like in this one, that's probably going to be what starts to happen. But Laurie herself probably has this inkling that shit is like, is Michael coming back? And you have Laurie be the Laurie from this film with hints of the Laurie that we've gotten from the previous two. And then so you kind of let that play out. As you get more towards the end, then that's when you probably get the reveal for most people that, oh shit, Michael himself is actually back. And that's when you also start to play into the mob mentality from Halloween Kills. You tone it down a bit, but you have that sort of be like what we saw in this one, more of what kind of pushes Corey and starts to like, like the dealing that he's dealing with. And then so you kind of have that as a thorough line for the trilogy. You end the first film with Karen getting killed, like how she did with Halloween Kills. You have that happen. Therefore, that's when you start to see Laurie go into hunter mode. That's when you get to Halloween Kills, that's when you start to see that Laurie from Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills start to go into effect, because she actually has reason and and logic to why she needs to go after Michael after all this time, knowing that he's finally come back, knowing that he killed her daughter, and then so she has to fucking that's when the hunt begins in that film. And then so again, you kind of continue along, and so you're continuing along with the elements of Allison and Corey, their relationship, and then Corey still being pushed into madness. Maybe some people don't believe that Michael's back still, and they still want to blame him, and so you kind of keep that going along. By the time you reach the end of Kills, that's when you have the final Laurie and Michael confrontation, similar to how the end of 2018, where you could have that basement set up, and maybe where you could see where she kind of did have some of that, where she's still like throughout, she's still like writing her memoir. Maybe that's been her way of coping, like she's maybe on and off writing it for 40 years and blah blah blah. Where so she still has that underlying like idea of just like, could he come back one day? I don't know. And then maybe you see that she still has some trap in place. You're like, holy shit, wait a minute, she actually did kind of plan for the potential possibility that he's come back. And so with that Halloween 18 ending, you have it to where she traps herself in that basement with Michael. And in that process, she maybe saves Allison, and Corey has to kind of drag her out of the house. And then Laurie has her moment with Michael's like, this is it. This is just the two of us finally at it. So you kind of have those final confrontation moments like what we had at the end of 2018, where it's a more drawn out fight. You get to that moment, they burn together, at that basement. And then so that's the end of that. But maybe by the end of that, you see the tease to where Corey, like in this one, is
Picks
pushed
up the
into that
mask.
essence of Michael. We get the tease of that. And then you can go into Halloween Ends, and then where you start to see Corey kind of become that Michael persona as he's with Allison. You kind of watch that play out, and then he's kind of like that Michael throughout that film. And then so where Laurie, where Allison kind of becomes the new Laurie, Corey kind of becomes the new Michael. And so as their feud kind of continues through them, you kind of have that be the epilogue for the trilogy as them kind of having to face each other. And maybe Allison finally finishes him off. And then by the time that's all said and done, like in this one, she can kind of maybe leave Haddonfield and kind of go about her own life, leaving behind, the Strode history and the Michael history there, and she can kind of go on her own path. And then maybe, just maybe, at the end of that film, you can kind of maybe have like a lingering shot on that tunnel in which you see Michael like a straight on shot to where you can very as slowly you start to hear some breathing maybe creep in and kind of increase a bit. So you can kind of get that tease at the fact that maybe Corey himself is still alive. And so where you still ended the saga, you still gave Laurie, you gave Michael, you gave Allison all their final moments and all their kind of, where they're at peace and they're dealt with their shit. But you can have that hint to where Corey himself could potentially be that new Michael that may or may not re-emerge from that tunnel one day and wreak havoc again. And so you can just kind of cut it there to where, yeah, the Michael and Laurie saga is at an end, but potentially the Corey saga, maybe down the line, if you wanted to tease that sequel, just give it a little bit of a taste for the future.
Just a tip.
Yeah, just a tip. So that would be my idea. That's why I don't know about you, but to
That
me,
makes sense.
that makes perfect logical sense as far as again giving all the characters their motivations for what we saw here in Ends and in Kills is taking everything that this trilogy gave us, but literally just having to flip shit. Like you have to replace everything that you've set up. That's why this character should have been there from the jump. You should have watched that play out throughout, and then like I said, you give Laurie and Michael their final moments in that film, and you just set off where Allison and Corey could have their moments, and then bam, you're done. That to me would have set up a perfect trilogy as far as watching storylines start and end, and watch all these characters go through their arcs where everyone gets their finality in the best possible way.
And
that to
then
me makes the most sense.
In your line up there, that poor sheriff would have had more of a fair shake.
Yeah, like I said, everything, despite whether you loved or hate Kills, loved or hate Ends, whatever, again, the pieces were there, but everything should have been thought through a hell of a lot differently. They really should have had this character in mind from the start. He should have been there from the beginning. And like I said, I wouldn't have changed a damn thing about the opening of this film. I would have put that at the start of Halloween 18. So again, 40 years after the fact, you give the audience a hell of a gut punch. It's reminiscent of that original film. And then, like I said, you give everyone their finality, but you give just a tease to where, yeah, it's not Michael, where the story is complete there, but that potential hint at the future for what could be. If you wanted to pick this up later, and do that more anthology route, Corey is there. He could be there, maybe, maybe not, but there you go.
You know what? I thought of, I don't know if you had that in mind, is the whole Corey doing the killing, but they don't know if it's Corey doing the killing. Like one or two out of 20 or however many people that he wanted to that he killed or blah blah whatever, it would have been like, I don't know if that was Michael, but it was kind of enough like Michael. I'm like, would he really do something like that? Like a kind of sowing the seeds and then finish it the way you had said.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, again, just like that just came to me yesterday. It just hit me. I was like, wait a minute. No, the story is there. These characters are there. The motivations are there. But this entire trilogy literally needed to be reshaped. And if you had done that, at least it would have been cohesive and concise. It would have given pretty much all the fans everything that they needed from a new Halloween trilogy. You set up the motivations. That mob mentality should have been placed more on Corey. He should have been there from the start. You have that opening to kick things off. And then again, you really and it plays more still into that mystery of Michael, where 40 years, Where did he disappear to after that night? Who the hell knows? Like, so you don't really need an explanation for that. At least you're not doing this weird stuff where Michael's in the tunnel. It only been a 4 year gap, but even though he should have been more powerful or whatever, he's just been withering away. Then it doesn't matter because it still leaves that mystery aspect. Like after that, like maybe something once that incident happened that night, something about that sort of reawoken the evil, or maybe just whatever. It's just maybe by happenstance, who the fuck knows? But again, it just sets things up that way to where it gives all the characters their proper motivations and reasonings for going where they go. And you could have gone through a lot with this and given, like I said, just everyone their closure points, and it gives a nice tease for what you could potentially go back to in the future if you wanted to. But that's
Mm-hmm.
just me, and I feel like that's the most concise way possible. So the story was absolutely there, but they really should have thought about this a hell of a lot sooner. And I would love to know what anyone else would think about that, because to me that's the most logical reasoning for any of this. And because you know in Halloween Kills they were going after that one other inmate that whole time, even though most people should have known better, especially because you know they saw Michael's picture on that screen. It's
Well,
like, you
but
know
it
this guy is
was
not
like
Michael.
out of focus.
That would have made sense if that had been placed on Corey, because they basically
Right.
done that in this movie, that same type of situation on how people view him, and that should have played in that once the killing started to
Mm-hmm.
reoccur, because things have been peaceful for 4 years. No one knows what happened to Michael, and knowing damn well he's not sitting in some prison or some institution somewhere, is just like, what the
Mm-hmm.
fuck. And knowing that Corey's right there around the corner, you're just like, no, it's that dude. But then no, holy shit, it is Michael. Blah blah blah. It gives all their characters their arcs. You're done. There you go. That was the perfect trilogy right there. But I guess they didn't think about that.
No, they should have hit you up. Apparently.
I mean, now that I think about that, I'm honestly pissed off because I'm like, how did I just think about that in 5 minutes after seeing this? And I haven't heard anyone else say that. I was like, because the pieces are there, they are absolutely there. But this should have been done way differently now, because everything was set up, but it really should have played out that way. I would have, if I had seen it that way, I've been like, that makes perfect sense. I'm cool with that. You know what? That actually makes for a nice like little story from the original to the end. I'm like, okay, whatever. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we'll just go ahead and wrap it up there. It's gone long enough. But hopefully that, if anyone happens to see this, I I personally like that idea. I don't know what you would think, but I think that at least
It would have
leaves
made
for a
more
more
sense.
cohesive storyline and would have given characters all their motivation that they needed. To me, that absolutely makes sense. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, that's just me. So thank you very much for watching this. If you did, I am Iron Raiden. This is Blood Honey. And we are out.